So November, we just finished up November. Today's the start of December. We got some snow this morning. Fantastic. And I'm here with Tim McKean and the wonderful Sarah Martin. And we're here to wrap up our discussion on discussions. So what did you think? What was your impact, or what was your thoughts at the end of this unit?
I think the main idea that most people came away with was just the importance of really prepping their students, really establishing expectations, and I think we talked about that in several different ways. One was really just being very explicit in your instructions about what expectations students have, what the outcome, the desired outcome is for the discussion. We're doing this discussion for this purpose, how it applies into the course. And then the idea of giving examples of positive and negative responses, so that they're, again, very clear about what's expected of me in both senses. What's a good way to respond, and just to identify what poor responses are. And then the last main idea was the idea of using a rubric to really be granular about describing what it is that you're going to be looking for as an instructor when you're grading that response. And use the criteria. We saw a wide range of rubrics, and I think the ones that I thought would be most effective were the ones that had more criteria. So it was, it talked about, maybe one criteria talked about referencing a source, and one criteria talked about the length of the response, or one criteria talked about the content, or, so that there was several different criteria so that you could grade really detailed on how the response met your expectation or not.
Sure, and from a student's perspective, it really takes the mystery out of what's my grade gonna be. Is this one of those classes where I can say, cool idea, bro, and get 5? Or, do I need to learn the hard way and realize that my response isn't appropriate? So you're setting up those clear expectations right away, and then they know what kind of effort they need to put in, then they will put in that effort. You set the bar, and they're gonna reach for it.
Yeah. So we have Sarah with us today because we talked with Sarah and worked with Sarah kind of leading up and preparing for this module as well, because you've done quite a bit of research and experimentation into the use of your discussion boards in your courses. What were some of the main topics or the most important things that you saw being tossed around in the module?
Well, I definitely agree with you guys about the rubrics. I think that was a really important move for a lot of people. I think it was something that they hadn't really thought about. But even more in depth, not just not thinking about the rubrics, but actually thinking about moving beyond a generic rubrics. So actually, in particular for that assignment, I think that was something that came up a lot, of not just saying what your word length is, that's consistent across all the discussions, but actually getting very particular to that content item. I think that came across in some of the discussion posts. I agree with you about the objectives and the outcomes and being really clear about that. I think that came through a good deal. And also kind of tying it back to the overall idea of what the class is, and making sure that your discussion boards, I think to some degree, don't waste your time or the students' time, that they actually are connected to something that's concrete within the class. I think Jennifer, who is an instructor over in geology, actually mentioned the fact that she's taken out some discussion boards because she felt like they weren't connecting to what the overall objective was of the class. And I think that's a really good thing to reflect on.
Yeah, I really appreciated that she said that, because one of the big points that we tried to make in the training was you don't need to use a discussion if there's not a lot of value in the peer responses. And that came across a lot in the reflections, was just thinking about when a discussion is the appropriate tool, and when you just need an assignment. When is the feedback only important for the instructor, and when is there value in that student-to-student interaction as well?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think I brought that up in my end of the module survey when I said one of the things that I loved about this unit was the ability to talk with your peers about an online teaching tool that seems to be the common approach and the best approach, quote unquote, to teaching online, but not actually a tool that's very well talked about. So we all kind of default to, oh, you should be doing a discussion, but we never actually talk about how do you facilitate a really strong, effective discussion.
Exactly.
And that was something that I loved about this module, was getting able to kind of tease apart that conversation and getting to do that in the discussion boards.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too that I found was just the idea of, I think even people who are really strong in discussion boards already actually spent the time really reflecting about, am I as clear as I think I am?
Mm-hmm.
Or even if my discussion feels like it perfectly works, is it as polished as it could be?
Yeah.
So I think even the people who have been really experienced with discussion boards still got something out of this module.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good observation, because in the design world, we have something called the curse of knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's this idea that you already know how something works. It makes it harder to teach that thing because you already know so much about it, right? And so as an instructor putting up a discussion board, it's real easy to because you're so close to the content and because you know clearly what you want your students to do and you understand what the discussion is for and how it should work. If the students don't have that same understanding as you, then there's a disconnect between what your expectations are and what the product is you're going to get. And so it's really, you have to really focus on, this is something we do all the time in instructional design, is we have to really focus on getting into the student's head and really approaching it as if we knew nothing about this. If I came to this page and I had no idea what you wanted me to do, does it tell me? You know, and that's one of those things as instructors, it's okay to be really redundant and give the instructions again. You know, here's what I expect of you. This is etiquette. This is, you know, how your response should look. And it's okay for it to have that same instruction on every discussion board if you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about that on the drive in today in terms of how I agree with you about the repetitiveness. And then I started to think is, at what point should we be able to expect the students to take responsibility? So for me, I can see the repetitiveness in the first several discussion boards, but by the time I get to today, which is for my hybrid class, the last time we see each other face to face before the final, I don't feel like there's some things I don't feel like I need to do or need to say for a discussion board at this point. They should be able to take what they've done in the past and be able to apply it. And we've talked about that. So I think it's the idea of moving that bar of expectations as well and allowing that to increase so that you're actually getting them to build some knowledge, not just in content wise, but their ability to use and articulate use discussion boards and articulate their ideas without having to be prompted constantly to do so.
Sure. And that's what those, early models help. You show examples early in the quarter, and then maybe you can pull those back as your course goes on.
Or you do it, or you end up doing it in a different way. I still modeled today what I expect for the last discussion board, but the way I modeled it is I showed the TED Talk and I broke them into groups, and they had to come up with a summary of how they would do that if that was their TED Talk for the discussion board. So instead of actually providing them with a model, this time they did it. And I think that was something that came out in some of the discussion boards, particularly the latter one about reflecting on it, and just in terms of trying to move your students up a few bars in Bloom's taxonomy by using the discussion boards. And how do you do that effectively?
Yeah, and I was talking to Greg Richards at SEC outside of discussions, and he was talking about how his expectations grow throughout the quarter, and it may be very superficial when the quarter begins, but by the end of the course, you are very high on those rings of Bloom's taxonomy, and you are asking, deeper thoughts and analysis and creative aspects. And the students kind of step back, and when they reflect on the class, they go, "Wow, look where we've gone here."
Yeah, we never did really talk about in the module, the variance between the beginning of a term and the end of a term. So that's a good observation. That more structure to the beginning of a term is normal, and then as those expectations get established, and as students fall into a routine in your course, figuring out how your course works, then less guidance is necessary, and you can kind of move on there. So thanks for bringing that up. You were going to say something, and then I interrupted you.
I don't remember.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's all right. So it's December, like I said, and so we are going to move on from discussions. And our module this month is about your homepage. We're coming back home for this month. And so
doesn't everybody go back home for this month?
Yeah, tis the season, and so we're really going to focus on that first impression your student gets when they get into your course, and how easy is it for them to navigate, and is everything there that can really provide them with the first steps of success. And so December, it's going to be a optional hybrid session, so you have chances for face-to-face with the wonderful Tim and Ben, and it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Are you gonna have cookies?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Sarah volunteered
We'll
to
have
bake
cookies.
cookies.
I was not volunteering to bake anything. I'm just asking if they're going to be provided.
I think we could probably provide some cookies.
We can make cookies happen.
Yeah. So, so what the plan is, we're going to be teaching how to look at your homepage, evaluate the purpose of a homepage and the different roles that it plays. You're going to do some practice evaluation on some other people's homepage, not from CCS, and then turn it around and take a look at your own homepage. And then we'll be here, we'll be on each campus
Yep.
one day during the faculty work days. That's, pardon while I look back here,
12th and 13th.
the 12th and 13th of December. And so we'll be on SFCC campus on Monday that week, and at SCC on Tuesday. And the times are all in the module and stuff. So that for that last step of going in and looking at your homepage and redesigning your own homepage, if that's something that's just a little bit more advanced than you're comfortable doing on your own, feel free to come on in, and we'll sit down and help you with that in the office.
Yep. So once again, fantastic November discussion. I really enjoyed that module as a student or a fellow colleague. I really enjoyed these conversations, and thanks to Miss Martin, Dr. Martin, for joining us this week. And we look forward to December's module.
Yep.